are important, and freedom has many forgotten areas where you, my listener, and many like you, have just surrendered to the ever-present claimant and pretender, and that would be the modern nation state, and the modern nation state's little children, which are the states. Though the states are the originals, in many cases they've seceded virtually everything to the national power in Washington, and so they are little administrative copies of their master in the federal district. And we have questions about how far this can go, and is there any way of redressing a grievance? Now, of course, we don't think it's a grievance because we don't know the problem, but we will chat for a minute now about the problem of the right of movement and the right of moving personal property from point A to point B. It could be also called the right of free communication, by personally going from one point to another to talk to somebody. Okay, that's called communication. When you travel by car or truck, or maybe even a two-wheeled machine contraption of some kind, motorcycle or such a bike as that, can you do that freely, or must you do it only because you have begged permission from some good party or other that claims ownership of that activity and somehow licenses that activity, though it's not a profession? Traveling is not a profession such as engineering or licensing or lawyering or accounting, which are professions that are licensed. Here we have a sort of a pseudo state privilege, which is the movement of traffic and the control by the state of that activity. On the phone we have Kurt Riggin. He is in Denver, and he is the chief of the Cupelli Indian Nation. This is an Indian tribe of about 200 people off the coast of Washington, or on the coast of Washington State. He's not an attorney, but he's a member of the federal bar, and is greatly concerned with the rights of indigenous people and the rights of people who are of other nations, right? Who have allegiance to sovereignties other than any of the 50 states or Washington. Kurt, just briefly describe to my listener what your life is like as a tribal chief of the Cupelli Indians, and Cupelli. Cupelli. Okay, thank you, Cupelli. What is your life like? What do you spend your time doing? I think it's in the legal arena, right, Kurt?
Yeah, I consult with a lot of different tribes. I've been doing work for several different federally and non-federally recognized tribes for probably over 20 years now.
And what are you doing for them? What kind of
I'm actually a tribal attorney. So I am an attorney. I'm not a member of any state bar, but I'm a member of several federally recognized tribal bars, including the Puyallups, Tulalipes, Muckleshoot, Pilchucks, the Karluks, Yupiks, Aleuts, Togiaks, Shugiaks, Blackfoot, Crow.
And so what are the just briefly, what are the kind of problems that these tribes are having for which you consult, Kurt Riggin?
Oh, well, everything from stolen gooey duck clams to violation of civil rights. That's pretty common. You'd be surprised how much Indians are treated lesser humans. I would atone it to how blacks were treated back in the 60s. And a lot of places, they're especially in the smaller towns and places right off the reservation, they're really poorly treated. I mean, we get cases like for example, the Tulalip tribe. The sheriffs from Snohomish County would come in force, where there'd be 8 or 10 sheriff's cars. They'd come onto the reservation and they'd arrest people, in mass. So you get 40, 50 people get arrested for, things like driving in their own driveway. You know, oh, you didn't have a license for driving in your driveway. Well, it's their driveway. They don't really need a license. And it's on a federal Indian reservation. But they'd drag them into state court in Marysville, into their county court, and they'd prosecute them. And I'd have to go in there and say, okay, everybody that wants to get their case dismissed, put your name on this list. You know, everybody that was arrested on their Indian reservation, on federal Indian land, put your name on this list. Then I'd go up to the judge and say, you have one of two choices. You can either dismiss all these cases with prejudice, or I will remove them to federal district court, and you can explain to the federal magistrate how your county boys have jurisdiction on federal Indian land. And the judge would say, give me the list. And he'd go through and dismiss everybody on the list. Because, they don't have jurisdiction on federal Indian land. The counties would come in and, poach defendants is what I called it. And they get away with it. Because, nobody wants to step up and argue with these guys. And so it's, there's not a lot of people that stand up for, tribes and their members.
Well, here in Tennessee, Kurt Riggin, we have a similar phenomenon, and I really appreciate the language that you're suggesting here, poaching defendants. In Tennessee, the state government, through its Tennessee Highway Patrol, poaches defendants who are using the public right-of-way and exercising the free exercise of the right of movement, poaching defendants and hauling these people for exercising constitutionally guaranteed rights into court as criminals. And one case I've been following out of Middle Tennessee, a man was convicted of 4 counts in December 2015. 3 of them were travel related, no tag, no registration, and expired or no license. In that case, there was also a gun count. And these are effectively state crimes against innocent people who are harmless. And the man argued that he was not in commerce. There was no showing of him being in commerce. He had numerous important motions about jurisdiction denied offhandedly in a one-day trial in Lawrenceburg, Tennessee. What is the? Can you evaluate just briefly for my listener the kinds of claims that people like that make? Is it possible to travel on the public right-of-way without being in commerce, or to be free from being poached by the sheriff's men?
Well, that's the tough part, because it's hard to educate these people without actually taking them to court and fleecing them of money and maybe even their freedom, because they're hard-headed people that are used to getting their way and used to doing things a certain way. And when you start educating them, that's the last thing they want to hear.
You're talking about police officials around the state.
Yeah, and or court officials. When you go in there and say, well, here's the thing. You adopted Title 48. Your state adopted Title 48, which is the U.S. Code, which says you have the right to regulate interstate transportation of passengers, commodities, or livestock for hire. Period. So you have the right to regulate commerce on the roads, but not everybody's in commerce. You obviously can, they assume that everybody is a corporation and that everybody's in commerce. And that's not necessarily how it works, especially, in the case I deal with, Indians, tribal members. They're just trying to get from point A to point B. They're not transporting passengers, commodities, or livestock for hire as required to get a license. Most people don't understand the only people that are required to have licenses, proof of insurance, and registrations are people who transport passengers, commodities, or livestock for hire on the roadways.
So you're saying, Kurt Riggin, you are the chief of the Cupelli Indian Nation, and work as an attorney, work defending people as though an attorney might. You're saying that even that Indians and Tennesseans can travel the roads in the state freely. Now, of course, you're on the Indian reservation. Is there,
as a matter of right?
As a matter of right, Indian reservations have. Do Indian reservations impose the same kind of system upon travelers there? Are there, or are Indian nations free to travel within their confines?
Yeah, Indians. Most Indians are free to travel within their reservation, and that's why you'll see cars. I don't know if you ever watched Sherman Alexie's movies, but he has a movie where he shows called Smoke Signals, where it kind of shows what the life of the Nez Perce are on the Nez Perce reservation. And you got people driving a car backwards because the forward gears are out. So you got people backing down the roads. Because hey, that's the only gear their car runs in at that point in time. So, all right, we'll go backwards. And you don't see people doing that on off reservation too often. So the res is most of the tribes are safe there. The tribal police are usually their relatives, and it's most reservations aren't as bad as say anywhere else in Tennessee, because it's mostly family. But there are the larger reservations, they have problems. They have tribal police that are acting like regular cops, and they're not.
Well, what is it in the training of police officers, whether tribal or in our corporate states today, that makes them so aggressive? Is that because they have a military background? They've served in the Army. They've been to Afghanistan. What are these?
A lot of them are former military. Which is good because they have that training. But at the same time, they are. And I don't want their job personally, because they have to deal with some of the worst dregs of society, some people that are having, the worst problems. And, and sometimes they create those problems by how would you put it? I would call it economic targeting. It's like, if you're driving an old beater, there's a really good chance you're going to get pulled over. If you're driving a brand new car, there's a really good chance you're not going to get pulled over.
Or if you're a white guy like me with a bow tie, very little chance of being harassed.
Well, less chance, that's for sure, especially in Virginia and some of the eastern states.
But if you're black,
probably wouldn't do you much good.
Black, young, driving a 1979 Caprice, perhaps you're gonna get pulled over for something. Your license plate light is out, sir. Or sir, we saw your left tire touch the white line and you didn't actually change lanes, or you made a turn without using your indicator light, buddy.
Yeah, and that's real common. They find probable cause wherever they can, and usually it's not too difficult. They can make that up. And it's a lot of times they'll say, "Oh, I saw you swerving in the line." Well, I never went over the line. That's all right. You swerved within the line. So they'll come up with some excuse.
You're driving too slowly
to demand your, license, registration, and proof of insurance. But here's what's a little different. I'm a little different than most people. Okay, when I get pulled over, what's the first three things they ask for?
I'd like to see your license, proof of registration, and insurance.
Exactly. And I go, did I do something wrong, officer? And they say, well, you were speeding back there, or you were, you didn't take you didn't make a turn signal, or what have you. They'll come up with, some excuse. And I say, okay, great. So am I under arrest? And they'll go in, well, I'm merely detaining you. You're not under arrest. I'm merely detaining you to conduct an investigation. I go, well, you ever heard of the term cardiac arrest? What's that mean? What does cardiac arrest mean?
Are you asking me? Okay, cardiac arrest is when the listener's telling me here, when your heart stops.
Exactly. So when your heart stops, you're under cardiac arrest. Well, the minute they arrest your freedom of movement, you're either effectively under arrest or you're free to leave.
What happens next in the conversation, Kurt Riggin?
You say, excuse me, Your Honor, but you do understand that, am I under arrest, yes or no? And they go, well, I'm merely detaining you. And you go, do you understand that cardiac arrest? You say, do you understand that the minute you arrest my freedom of movement, I'm either effectively under arrest or I'm free to leave. Which is it? And they go, well, if that's the way you want it, then you're under arrest. And
right.
I go, okay, great. Do you understand that that now that we both understand that I'm under arrest, once you arrest my freedom of movement, and I'm considered under arrest, then I have certain rights that you have to give me, and including my right to my right to travel, my right to free speech, but I definitely have a right to know why I'm under arrest. And at that point, you have to tell me what charge I'm being arrested for and what I'm under arrest for. You can't pull me over and detain me for half an hour, 45 minutes while you're trying to think of what you want to do. It doesn't work that way. And knowing that you're under arrest, like I'll say, am I under arrest? To go, okay, now if that's the way you want it, then you're under arrest. Okay. And then I go, okay, now that we both understand that I'm under arrest, if I say, let me get your delegation of authority. That really upsets them most of the time. And they'll tell you, this is my badge. And I tell them, well, that badge is no different than my middle finger. It is a symbol. It's not authority. Your delegation of authority lies in your ID. And you'd be surprised how many cops I have been pulled over that don't have an ID on them. And I let them know, without that delegation of authority, you have no authority to arrest me whatsoever. That uniform, that badge means nothing. I can get one of those down at any costume shop. But what means something is the law, and the law says, the minute I'm under arrest, I have certain rights, including the right to remain silent. So you say, if I give you my driver's license, my proof of insurance, and my registration, will you use these documents against me in a court of law? Yes or no? And they say, well, maybe. I say, well, I'll take that as a yes. Can I be compelled to give you documentation you can use against me in a court of law without my attorney present? Yes or no? They don't like that question. Because what is the answer to that one?
The answer is no.
No, you can't be compelled to give information against yourself that they can use against you in a court of law. You have a right to remain what?
Right to remain silent. And this is David.
Silent, exactly.
This is David Tulis. We're talking with Kurt Riggin. Kurt is in Denver. He is the chief of the Cupelli Nation. Cupelli Nation, which is off the coast of Washington, a couple hundred people, a small tribe on the coast of Washington. He is a member of the federal bar, and he has a noted case in Colorado where he was prosecuted for filing complaints against official. He was prosecuted for UPL, which means unlicensed practice of law, and the case went all the way up to the high court. And Kurt is a man he's a tribal advisor, but he's also, as we're hearing, a bit of a travel advisor. People who are traveling on the roadway and who are stopped, arrested, and detained by the good people. the people in uniform who represent public health, safety, welfare, or so we're supposed to believe, who are often poaching defendants in the free market, bringing them into the state system and into court and prosecution. This is David Tulis. We'll be right back. We're talking with Kurt Riggin, who is an Indian chief with a legal interest. David Tulis, hang on.
In-depth traffic, news, and information. Mornings on Nooga Radio, AM 1240 and 92.7 FM. The Tennessee Valley's news, talk, and sports leader. Nooga Radio, AM 1240 and 92.7 FM.
3, 2, 1.
Chattanooga Radio, AM